This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
It's a one-stop shop for all your butter needs at Pepe Sayer. So if you're a restaurant or an airline or a function centre or a cafe, you can give us a call or jump online with us, and we have everything you need for your butter needs. We cover all of it. The biggest one for me is the little logs that we make that you can cut down and put a little Pepe Sayer tab on it. Also the 15-gram portions, but we also do blocks. And in the blocks, so we do 25 kilo or 20 kilo, but we also do a 2 kilo. So you can buy a block of butter 2 kilo, and the prices are really competitive with the rest of the markets on those products.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
We're not doing this to replace humans or replace talent or it's to amplify human talent and productivity. And we can get this in balance. We don't want it to overcome us. We don't want it to ride over us. We want it to be in balance.
There is probably nothing that has popped into the public conversation as quickly and as surely and as sometimes concerningly as AI. We were wondering, what impact is AI going to have on food, on hospitality? Is it something that we need to be thinking about? To dig into this question, we have futurist Craig Rispin. He's from the Future Trends Group. He's based in Sydney. He's appearing at Fine Food Australia, but we thought this was a great opportunity to grab him for a chat about all things food and tech. Craig, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Oh, I'm so excited about this conversation. There's so much happening in the world of AI in every industry, including the food industry.
Yeah, well, let's just get right to it. What are the things that you're seeing in food, and do people need to be worried about losing their jobs to AI?
No, it doesn't matter what industry, but especially in the food industry. What I'm saying I mostly consult with business leaders, and these business leaders across many industries, what I say to them is the future isn't AI instead of jobs. The future is jobs plus AI. So I say to anyone, why don't you get an AI to do a job you don't like doing? So for instance, what if you don't like, I don't know, let's say that you're a chef and remember all those invoices that are piling up for the food deliveries and you need to get them into zero or something. Well, now there are tools that use artificial intelligence that can scan all of those dirty receipts and invoices and put them straight into zero for you. Yes, there's an AI to do that. And there's all sorts of tools. And so I say to everyone, no, don't fear AI. Get an AI to do a job that you really don't like doing. And then think about it the other way. How about an AI that would, make it look like you have superpowers? So, for instance, what if you run a restaurant and it's a free-from restaurant? What is a free-from restaurant? Well, over the many years that I've been on the Talking Trends stage at the Fine Food Show, I've just been looking at the exhibitors. I've seen that number of aisles of this giant show, all the exhibitors. The first year, 10 years ago, probably now, that I was there was probably one aisle of free from gluten, free from nuts, free from dairy, you name it. And it just kept on growing. And now I wouldn't be surprised if this year it's going to be 40% of the show is free from. So what if you could use AI to design menus for people that are free from all these variables? And it's getting complicated, isn't it? So why wouldn't you use AI to do that? Okay, I've got this. How can I make that with what I've got for those people that need to be any of these kind of free from things?
Yeah, I can really see that. And I agree with you. Free from is such a burgeoning category, and so much crossover with it as well. So I think a lot of producers are thinking, why don't I make these products free from all of the common allergens.
Yes. And you can see that not yet here in Australia, but I know that the supermarkets are working on it because I advise both of the big brands. You would know who they are. And in Tesco in the UK, they have an app on your phone and it's got that free from category. So you can look at all the products based on that free from. And I think that next time you go to a restaurant booking app, you're going to have an option for free from restaurants. And it's so complicated. How could you, as a chef, food preparer, how could you, make up these menus with all those variables that, it's mind boggling what you would have to do. So I'm thinking that this could be a really exciting opportunity, but there's so many options. And of course, AI is built into a lot of these robots that are co-cooking food with food preparers.
Yeah, well, tell me more about that, because I've seen that in, let's say, a Korean fried chicken place where there's a robot that's frying the chicken. Having spoken to a business owner of one of those places, they talk about how it's improved staff retention because the robot is the one standing by the fryer, and the human staff can do, I guess, work that's less tiring, less potentially dangerous. What are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing what everybody knows, and that is getting staff is a big problem. You just can't get the people. And I say to leaders of these organizations, well, what if AI and robotics could solve your staffing issue? And it really could, because, for instance, there's one restaurant that my partners at the Fine Food Show, Food Insight, and the Rod, my business partner, Sissel, there, they were talking and meeting with this owner of this noodle restaurant, and they brought in robotic co-chefs, and they're making noodles, and they've reduced the need for staff by 45%. Now, you might say that's eliminating jobs. It's not eliminating jobs if they can't frickin' fill them, right? And that's solving a talent issue. And a lot of these robots are doing, as you point out, the jobs that we really don't like doing or shouldn't be doing because they're particularly dangerous.
How interactive or adaptable are these robots? We found one that fries chicken, we found one that makes noodles. If somebody's thinking, well, my restaurant makes rice paper rolls, or my restaurant grills steak, are these robots programmable for multiple uses?
They are, and especially if the food service person programming it have played video games in the past or currently, because there are systems that can learn from your fingers. So you slip on these gloves, a bit like we're going to see in the augmented reality world that Mark Zuckerberg's talking about, the metaverse. And you put on these little probes on the tops of your fingers, and there are co-chefs, that can essentially record what the chef is doing and record that as a recipe. And not only this, it can, do the dishes. And that's what I'm most excited about. Not only can it do the cooking, but it can do the dishes and the cleaning up afterwards. And who wouldn't want a robot that does that? So, yes, adaptable. What you're talking about is a general case robot rather than a specific single-use robot. And we're seeing, because of AI, you see, AI is really important in robots to make them not dangerous to humans. Because if it's a single-use robot, you've probably seen these in auto manufacturing. They literally put them in cages and are in glass because it doesn't know the humans there, and it'll just knock them over and potentially kill them. Well, that's a single-use robot that does the same thing over and over and over again perfectly. So what we want are these cobots that work with us, so we can push them aside and they move aside or get away from us entirely, and to be able to get them, if it could swing around and go to one counter and chop some things up and then do the deep frying, maybe do the noodles or pasta, what it might do. And I think that this is really going to be a savior because I'm looking at the numbers. As a futurist, I look at demographic shifts and immigration and so on. It's because of COVID, and we weren't allowing 250,000 people per year immigrate for almost 3 years. We got a lot of catching up to do, and staffing issue isn't going to go away. We're looking at the numbers. This is just facts. The staffing issue is not going to go away for at least another 2.5, 3 years. So we're going to be living in this time where this technology has actually come up right when we need it.
And what about the investment that's needed to get some of these cobots into the kitchen? I mean, I can imagine that they would pay you back over time and that they, never call in sick. But it's a big upfront investment, isn't it? What are people looking at?
Well, not really. So luckily there are, as you would probably be aware of, here in Australia and around the world, there are organizations that will lease your kitchen equipment. And what we found is the upfront cost was so expensive for robots that they couldn't sell them that way. So they figured out a different way of doing it, and that is on an hourly basis. So as you use them, you pay, let's say, whatever the award wage is. $22.50 for a 19-year-old. Let's say if that's the rate. And so they'll actually lease it to you for $22.50 per hour as you use it. And this is, I've seen throughout industry, and it's now coming to the food industry, where it's not just a monthly fee, but it's as you use it per cooking hour, let's say. So did you know that when you fly on a Qantas jet, if you fly Qantas still, or the other airlines, they don't buy their jet engines anymore because they're horribly expensive. When the plane lands, it connects to Wi-Fi and shows exactly how many flight minutes there were, and then they get sent a bill that gets paid automatically. So that is essentially doing the same thing, but in the food industry. And every robot manufacturer that I'm seeing, and when it comes to robots for the food service area, has moved to this model of, no, it's not a capital expense, it's an operation expense.
Yeah, it's such an interesting space. I can't help but feel there's something lost. There's clearly something gained. I mean, what do you think about, the feeling of being surrounded by cobots?
Well, I have to say, every single operator that I've interviewed that have brought in robots, their sales have gone up and their turns have gone up. And they've connected to the community in new ways that they didn't even expect. In Japan, there's a whole generation of what they call, in, I don't know the Japanese term, I'm sorry, they're shut-ins. There are people that are afraid to leave their home or can't leave their home for whatever reason. And because the restaurants there can't get service staff, they connect these shut-ins in the community to these robots with screens who do the food service in the restaurants, just the delivery from the kitchen to the tables. And wow, does that make a difference in those shut-in people's lives? So I'm seeing that it's, drawing different levels of society in as well. And yes, I might be an optimist because I think that this is solving all problems. It doesn't solve all problems, but it solves the biggest problems we're having right now. And I think that in Australia, we're a little bit behind because, well, frankly, I think people are afraid of it. But once they start down the path, I know every client that I've worked with have gotten their first robot. They turn around and say to me, "Oh, let's go buy some more." That was fantastic. I never expected it could do that. So, yeah, I've got many clients. I bump into them and I said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, off to Germany to buy some more robots, Craig. They pay for themselves so quickly."
Surely they could fly themselves over as well, but maybe that's next. Craig, what about supply chain efficiencies and something that I'm really passionate about, which is reducing food waste? Like, are there innovations in AI that can help out there?
Oh, of course. And that's for especially in an area that my son, who works in infrastructure in the state of New South Wales, and specifically food security and water and the like. And he's passionate about vertical farming, and so am I. And so hydroponic and aeroponic, so hydroponic, running water across roots, and aeroponic is tiny little spray. So tiny little spray just going on those roots, and it works just as well. It uses 100 times less water. Well, AI is coming to that for how long should the lights be on? How much of this spray should be going out there? What should be the mix? And they can see the growth of the plant, and it can say, okay, this week we need to increase this or the other thing to encourage growth. And what I'm really excited about is some of these local, they're like containers that supermarkets have put on some of their roofs around America and in Europe, and especially in Scandinavia, where it gets really cold. But in these containers, they can insulate them. The lights heat them naturally because their LED lights do run hot if you've got a lot of them. And what they're seeing is that they can do 5 or 6 seasons of growing for seasonal plants, 5 or 6 seasons in one season. And they can just go grab that lettuce or whatever it might be, strawberries, tomatoes, out of the container and package it. And some of the automation from that's all powered by AI now for doing this is, you could have one container, you could be growing those things and putting it straight into packaging, reusable packaging, by the way, that you could then take straight from the roof down into the supermarket. Now, we haven't seen this yet in Australia, but it just makes sense to me, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, when you think about so many of those suburban supermarkets that are just big flat buildings with flat roofs, then absolutely that makes sense. That's I did not think you were going to say that. That is really that's an excellent innovation. What about food waste? I mean, I can see there's efficiencies in the supply chain with what you're talking about, but are there other ways that that AI can assist in reducing food waste?
Oh, yes. Especially when it comes to how we can use that food waste in various ways for generating energy. So spoiled food is a big problem, obviously, when we've got plant life, but that plant life can be turned into energy. And we've got now tools on our phones that are just remarkable. So there's a Australian startup, and they're using the latest cameras and lights that are built into, let's say, an iPhone 12 or higher. And they can actually look at the molecular fingerprint of the biomass or the gases, in fact, that are coming off. This is so mind-blowing how accurate it is that it's being used in the wool industry right now to look at the quality of a single strand of wool. And a farmer can do this now, and he doesn't have to rely on the person at the auction house to tell him what grade his wool is. He can tell the auction house what grade his wool is, and there's no funny business going on. So there's incredible tools, and that also looks at the molecular fingerprint, uses AI to look at all the existing molecular fingerprints that have been saved up in the cloud, finding one that matches instantly and saying, okay, it's this quality wool, or this is how we could use this spoiled food to generate heat, to generate energy, to run the container on top of the roof. And even when it comes to CO2, everybody's talking about what's going into our air. Well, one of the biggest chemical companies in the world, ICL, an Israeli global specialty minerals company, knows that they need to transfer their business from the coal and gas industry into other areas. So they've invested 2.75 euros, so let's call that 3.3 million Aussie approximately, into a company that will support this one-step fermentation process. So that's what is happening to biomasses when they rot. And this bioprocess will create a completely customizable protein ingredients by capturing the greenhouse gases that are created, CO2, and converting it into the 20 progenetic amino acids necessary for human nutrition. Yes, you've heard it here. You can take CO2 out of the air or from a biomass, and you can turn it into food.
Right. That is quite mind-blowing. So you're using fermentation to transform CO2 into amino acids that
Yes. Yeah.
are the building blocks of our food.
Yes. And if you want to know more about this, I don't try to promote individual companies, because the happy news is when I say there's this company doing this, everybody rushes to go and find them. But I should also say there are dozens of companies doing this. There'll be hundreds of companies doing this. But here's one. And that company it's Archeon. So it's Arkeon, a German-based organization. If you want to learn more about that very complicated scientific method that's spun out of a university, that's literally turning the CO2 that we're breathing out or from biomasses into amino acids and eventually into cereals, let's say.
Are there other innovations in the alternative protein space that you're pretty excited about?
Oh, yes. I'm really excited about non-fish fish and non-fish shellfish, because there's so many people that need to be free from shellfish. And the one that I tasted and I really like in Singapore was a non-shrimp shrimp that's actually made from the kelp, from the seaweed that these shrimp actually, or prawns actually eat from the algae. And they've created several different organizations, one in Singapore, and there's one in Monterey Bay in America, California. They've created an alternative to shrimp and to using what the shrimp actually eat. So they're essentially processing it in a factory with no bacteria, no nasties, no shells. And that will allow people who can't eat shellfish to enjoy, prawn meat, shrimp.
It's a very interesting cutting out the middleman way of getting protein. I suppose, we're often thinking about the amount of protein that wild fish or that cattle or whatever kind of calories or plant matter, whatever it is that they eat. And that conversion that's often inefficient when an animal does it. So I suppose to be able to, if you can get the nutrition without going through that whole life cycle, it's definitely something interesting to think about.
Yes, much more efficient. Incredibly. Yeah, many thousands of times, I would say. More efficient.
It's really interesting. I mean, I get excited by this stuff, but I also feel a little bit wistful about the olden days.
Of course.
How do you sort of balance excitement and, I don't know, like a nostalgia or a clinging to the past, Craig?
Well, look, if you look at the market, we're actually already doing that. So we've got these, new higher tech ways of cooking food in our kitchens that consumers didn't have. Just 20 years ago, I'm thinking about air fryers and sous vide and, the consumer versions of salamanders, grillers in the kitchen now. I've got a microwave that does 6 completely different things. And when I tell some chefs, I got a microwave that's also a steam oven that's also a griller, they're like, it's a consumer product? Expensive microwave, $600, but it does all those functions. Well, all those functions means that, that's a high-tech way to go back to basics. So it means that we can process raw food instead of, commercial grade food in new ways in our kitchen. And isn't it interesting that we're going back to recipes in these new kitchen gadgets that grandma made? But instead of, slaving over a hot kettle for 3.5 hours, I'll give you, for instance, I like to cook some jambalaya. So it's a rice, tomatoes, veggies, shrimp, sausage dish. And if I do this over the stove, it's, many hours. I do it in my pressure cooker, it's 6 minutes. But I'm going back to the whole foods that's traditional. It's just done in a new way. And what I say with my clients when they're worried about AI, look, we're not doing this to replace humans or replace talent or it's to amplify human talent and productivity. And we can get this in balance. We don't want it to overcome us. We don't want it to ride over us. We want it to be in balance. And if you're ever worried about AI or robotics taking over, just remember, you can always pull the plug. You can always pull the plug.
You can always shove that cobot aside and grab the fryer yourself.
Yes. Wouldn't recommend that. You could burn yourself pretty badly. And for a consumer app that I was going to recommend, that's kind of related to the one that can grade milk, and it can grade wool and fibers and raw fish flesh. It can, I don't know if you know this, but many people in the food industry do know that about 60% of all fish that's sold at retail is involved in fish fraud. It's not the product that you actually bought, and being able to scan and identify where that barramundi came from, a farm in Queensland, or rather fed terrible things in Thailand, potentially, that affects the quality of the fish, and there could be microplastics in those fish, we know. And being able to have a scanner like that, but one that is a bit simpler, but I think makes a huge difference in consumers' lives. If you're counting kilojoules or calories, Snap Calorie, it's an app powered by AI, will snap an image of your meal and then attempt to, based on images, calculate the calorie count and micronutrients that are in that dish by a single photo that you take of your meal. And I know nutritionists that used to pay overseas people to figure out what the calorie count was of their clients snapping pictures. And now this is just an app, a service you pay for that costs tens of dollars. And a single picture, and it'll go, okay, this is what we think it is. And then they test it, and it's about 99% accurate.
Oh, that's interesting. It makes me think about, if the sauce is hidden under the protein, does it know about that as well? But Craig, it does. Okay. So fascinating to hear what's happening in this space. It's feels like it's moving at a great pace, but it's great to have you pull out some of the threads for us today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Of course. I just love to help people see what they might not see and be open to trying new ways of being and experience this future that we're all going to be part of. And we have to figure out what part we're going to play in it.
Love it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta @Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.